The competitive 40K network presents Art of War. Art of War. Strategy and tactics. Discussions with the best players on the planet. Now your host, Nick Nanavati.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Art of War 40K podcast. I'm your host, Nick Nanavati, and this week we are joined by my good friend and special guest, Matt Morosoli from the land down under. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's always a good time when it's come in here and talk about chaos stuff with you. It's the best part of my week, month, or year, depending on how well I'm playing at the time.
Dude, I love that. The last time you came on, I think you would just beat me in a Demon Mirror at LVO a couple years back, and now you're back at it. First place at Adelaide Uprising, the largest tournament in Australia. It's a huge event. It's like LVO, but down under. And first place with Tzeentch Daemons, of all things. You know, last week we had a guest on talking about Tzeentch Daemons, and now you're back at it with Tzeentch Daemons. Are demons good or something? Like, that's what we're here to find out. We're going to break down Matt's list. We're going to break down Tzeentch Daemons, of all things, and how they operate. They got a lot of tricks up their sleeves. And we're going to get to know Matt's prep for Uprising and all that good stuff. We're going to cover his strats, his tactics, his secondary play, you know. And then in part two, that's for our patrons, our lovely patrons who we love dearly. You get access to Matt's games. You get access to his knowledge, the play-by-plays, the specific moves he made, the things he shot, how he positioned. A lot of playing demons is in the micro phases of Warhammer, and that's what we're going to deep dive there. You don't want to miss it. You get access to part two by subscribing to Patreon, patreon.com/AOW40K. It's $5 a month. It helps us out tremendously and allows us to keep producing the show, which, Matt, you've been on multiple times. I might add, what a hero. This guy's an Art of War coach. Folks, sign up. It's great. Okay, Matt, enough spieling and dealing. Talk to me about Adelaide and your prep for it. Grotmus just came out in like December. All these brand new detachments. The demons got 4 detachments. I know you're a demon guy. Where did you even begin to process all this, and what was your preparation?
Yeah, so you probably had a pretty similar experience to me, I reckon. I'm keen to ask you something in a second, because obviously we got 4 detachments and most armies got 1. So great for Chaos Demons, because normally they sort of don't get that kind of treatment. And I kind of went through the the roller coaster of this one looks good, this one looks good, this one looks good. I was actually really hype on the Khorne detachment when it first came out. And the more I read it, the more I realized I didn't like it. Then I was really hype on the Tzeentch detachment, like a lot of people were, because obviously passing wounds off fiends is busted. And everyone else has kind of figured that out. But I played a couple of games with both. I didn't really love either of them. I sort of moved away from demons altogether. And then I kind of reread the Tzeentch one a bit, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And I put some stuff together, and it felt like I didn't have a lot in the army, but I played a game with a very early version of this list, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. The Uppy Downy is really cool. The Puppeteer Lord of Change is really cool. There's some stuff you can do here. Didn't think too much more about it. I was actually still playing CSM. I had like a couple of RTTs around the end of, December, whenever it was. And yeah, just kind of decided most of my armies felt kind of mid in the meta. Bridgehead and Vanguard are both very, very good, and there's some very good players coming to Uprising with those armies. I didn't want to meta hop, so I'm like, you know what, I'm going to play this because it's fun and no one else is playing it. And apparently it's okay. I thought the army wasn't that strong, but it does have a lot of tricks.
I think you surprised like the entire world by taking Tzeentch Daemons and doing well. And I can respect the choice. They have a lot of good things going on, which we'll get into. But, to actually have the dream run and go all the way undefeated with it is seriously impressive, Matt. Congratulations. I must say, this is awesome. Get all the bragging rights.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, look, I think I'm very big on not hopping around and playing the next hottest thing just because the internet tells you it's the best thing. And obviously, that has its place, right? Understanding which armies are really powerful and really strong has its place in competitive 40K, but I'm not the sort of person who will go and just buy the Guard army because, Guard are one of the strongest things in the game, right? I've got the Guard army sitting on a shelf next to me. I think I built 5 Scions and said, I actually don't want to play this. So I stopped.
Yeah, that's totally valid.
But playing stuff that you really like, I find you tend to do better with anyway. Playing armies you really enjoy and really vibe with, I find you tend to do better with. And I just said, you know what, not gonna chase the dragon here. I'm just gonna play something that I actually enjoy. And look, it worked out pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. That's some really awesome advice, and it's great to see someone can just play what they love, kind of irrespective of what conventional power level is and, get by. And I know you had those tough games. I know you played against Bridgehead and stuff. We're going to cover all that in part 2. So, like, it is doable. These are, like, top table games. So, right now, I think more than ever has been apparent that good generalship will carry you further than your list will if you just execute the plan really well. And I think this really highlights that. So, Matt, I'm excited to kind of poke your brain a little about the Tzeentch Demon army. But before we get there, why did you land, I guess, off of CSM? They're like, CSM are a perfectly good army. They just got their Fabi Spile detachment. I know you were playing them with the RTTs. What made you shift off?
Yeah, so I just didn't love the game. Again, Bridgehead and Vanguard specifically, I just didn't love the game into. I felt like the Inceptors were a massive problem for CSM. I just felt like Inceptors oath any of your big bricks if you play Biles, any of the Possessed or Chosen, and they just kill enough that it doesn't matter. And Guard just 6-inch drop and block you in, and then you get blown up by the other stuff. And we play a lot of WTC format terrain here, but Uprising was played on essentially GW layouts with not quite GW terrain, but like it's relatively good terrain. But the boards are in general a lot more open than we have in the WTC style terrain events that we have here. And I just wasn't convinced that, either 30 plus Possessed in Bile or, the typical sort of Renegade Raiders, Rhinos and combat units could really hang on those tables. I played a couple of practice games and I was just getting blown up. I think that a lot of the play with Renegades outside of things like the bikes using the fallback move to go and steal primary, I think a lot of the play there is really linear. It's just move, advance, charge, move, advance, shoot, that sort of thing. And I wanted to, play something a bit different, right? Because I just felt like that army would be good but not great, and I would just lose to Bridgehead or to Vanguard if I played it. And I figured, you know what? If I'm going to lose anyway, I may as well lose with something that's cool. But I just didn't lose, apparently.
You just didn't lose. Just play something cool and win anyway. The actual 40K dream.
Apparently.
I absolutely love it. You said you wanted to ask me something. I'm curious. What was that?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, what was your thoughts on the Demon factions, your first read through? What was your thoughts on sort of where they were positioned in relation to each other?
Oh, that's a great question. And like, I love it because we're both Demon players here, so I can be like straight with you on this. So I first read it and my instinct was like, Slaanesh is crazy. Like, these rules are nuts. It's still Slaanesh data sheets, so like, we'll see if it actually holds weight, but like, the rules are nuts. And then I read the Tzeentch one right after, and I was like, wait a minute, I can go up and down in combat, and I saw the Puppeteer dude. I kind of fell in love. Tzeentch is my favorite. So I was very eager to try both of those, but I secretly wanted Tzeentch to be better. I thought Nurgle was a sleeper pick, but Battle Shocks are only so good. And then Khorne, I read it, and like, Khorne's not for me, dude. Like, it literally just does Khorne better, and it doesn't shoot, it doesn't trick, it's so linear. I can't play like that. And then I put them all on the table a bunch of times. I basically, in all of my spare time in December when I wasn't pumping out Grotmus videos and podcasts, I was playing Tzeentch Demons and Slaanesh Demons and whatever as much as I possibly could. And the Slaanesh army I found really just kind of, it did its thing, right? Like, here's my army, you shoot me, you take your best shot, and next turn I'm going to charge you. Or like, maybe you get the charge and run them over. But it's very like, my army runs at you, and I hope that works. And that's a little too linear for me. And then the Tzeentch army, I got stat checked hard by Jax Orcs, dude. He played the tactical brigade and just like flash kitted me off the planet. It was so bad. So I felt like that's a bit of a hard counter, but it wasn't a great first game with the Tzeentch Demons. Yeah. And then the Nurgle army, I actually played a ton of games with, and I thought this is like shockingly good, shockingly good. But at the end of the day, it is slow, and I hate being slow. So that's kind of where my demon path has wound up. And now I'm just kind of exploring all.
Yeah, cool. I think that's kind of the experience a lot of people had, right? Is that your first read through of those detachments is pretty far removed from where they actually wound up. The actual power of them, you kind of figure out when you play them. It's hard to read them and just understand exactly how it's going to play and exactly what it's going to do.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. You had a similar experience to me where things kind of flipped after you played a couple of games.
Yeah, right. But I wish kind of I had stuck with Demons for LVO. So I was really gearing up for LVO the same way you were gearing up for Adelaide. And I decided, aside from Tzeentch, all these Demon RDs that are decent, I have Final Day GSC. which is, in my opinion, that's a great army, like one of the top armies in the game. And no one was talking about it. No one knows what it does. Like there's a real advantage there in itself. So I just hard pivoted, got a bunch of reps, went well, did 5-1 at LVO, lost to Josh Roberts. But if I was going to lose, kind of the same thing. I wish I just busted out the Tzeentch Daemons if I was going to lose. But unlike you, I wanted to give it my best shot.
Hey, look, there's no shame in losing one of those sort of top table games, right? Like it happens.
Of course.
No, very cool, man.
Dude, this podcast is about you. I could talk about this all day, though. Tell me about your preparation with Tzeentch Daemons. What were the practice games like leading up to Adelaide? Were there matchups that you were just hoping to avoid, or did you have like weird game plans for some theoreticals?
Yeah, so I played one game with the list as it was before I submitted it, which is probably not a great advertisement for the amount of prep I did.
Play what you know.
I played a bunch with other variants, right? So the first draft essentially of the list had 3 chickens. One of the Lords of Change had the Neverblade instead of the Demon Prince. I just found that wasn't very good. I think I know a few people who were trying that originally. Just found that Lord of Change wasn't very good in combat, and it made his shooting worse, so he kind of felt a bit awkward. But I originally had 3 of them, like 3 units of Screamers, 2 units of Flamers, 1 unit of Pinks, and that was basically the whole army. It was like big units everywhere. And I played a few games of that. I had a friend from New Zealand come and stay with me for a couple of weeks for work, and we played a bunch of games while he was here. And he was playing Vanguard, and I kept getting blapped off the board with Vanguard, and I'm like, oh yeah, cool, army's cool, but it's not actually any good. And I stopped playing it for a little bit then. Then I sort of tried a version. I put the Demon Prince in. I was basically just like running math on things in the Bridgehead and the Vanguard game. The first thing I found was like the Chariots are really good. The Burning Chariots will essentially tank a 3-man unit of Inceptors or a 10-man Scion unit. They won't die. They'll actually win the fight because they'll overwatch when they come down. They'll shoot and charge. The Chariots have 12 attacks in combat. It's pretty cool. They got the 6 Screamer attacks or the 6 Flamer Mouth attacks. So they're actually kind of good at killing things like Guardsmen. So I added those in because they felt like they were a really good tech for those 2 matchups. And then I put the Demon Prince in because the Demon Prince goes absolutely nuts on things like the Marneus Aggressor Brick. It goes nuts on like a 6-man Inceptor unit. It sweeps and it kills like most of a 15-man Scion unit. So I just started looking for things that were really good into both the Scion game and the Vanguard game. They were kind of like my 2 biggest worries in the meta. I wasn't too worried about things like Star Shadow Necrons. Like I can hide, I can shoot the scoring units and kill them. If the army's got 3 DDAs and the Silent King, I don't really care. I just don't get shot by it. But like Vanguard and Scions, you can't really avoid, right? They drop on you, they 6-inch drop, they pressure you. It's a much bigger problem. And so I just looked for data sheets that were good into those things. I toned the Screamers down so I'd have like smaller units for scoring. I kept finding I was throwing 6 away and not really getting value out of them. So I did that. I played a version with only 1 unit of Plague Bearers and with an Exalted Flamer and like another 3-man unit of Flamers and an RTT right at the start of January. And that went okay. I lost like a 1-point game into Invasion Fleet Tyranid army because Fateweaver couldn't kill 2 gargoyles from out of line of sight. Very cool. But I won the other 2 games. I'm like, oh yeah, this kind of has legs. I played Bridgehead in that event and I won that. It was a newer player, but Bridgehead kind of does what Bridgehead does. So it was a good bit of practice there as well. Those were really the early practice games I played. I played like 4 or 5 games against a friend of mine who came over in December. I played 3 games at an RTT, then like 1 game right before I flew out to Adelaide. I think the biggest difference was like the conscious shift to just take data sheets that felt like they were really good into Bridgehead and Vanguard, and also finding data sheets that had a lot of synergy with like the key strategy of the army, right? Like the idea of the 2 big birds staying back, not getting shot, having enough stuff to go forward and score, and then having like OC plays with things like the Pinks and the Plague Bearers made a really big difference. I think the 2nd unit of Pinks was like the best thing I ever did for the army. That was like, I probably wouldn't have won 3 of the games that I won if I had left the list without that 2nd unit of Pinks.
So rather than going through the iterations real quick, because I love that, but let's just go back to your practice games. You didn't play that many, like you said, but you've been playing a lot of Warhammer throughout your life, right? Like you've been playing this forever. Where do you think that balance lies before we get into your list specifically? Like some people need to play tons of games with their army and they play like one army all the time, like Scary plays Drukhari. Other people bounce around all the time. Some people don't get to play Warhammer that often. How did the balance work out for you where you didn't have to play your army too many times, but yet you won Adelaide Uprising?
Yeah, look, I think in hindsight, I definitely would have liked more practice games. I actually just genuinely thought I wasn't in with a shot, right? I thought I was going to go 5-3, 6-2. I genuinely didn't think it was really in the mix to win. If I thought I was in the mix to win, I would have played a lot more games. It's kind of hard to say, right? I played no games with it in its final form, but I spent a lot of time running the math on things. Like you don't need to play games into Bridgehead to understand the damage they do to you, the damage you do back to them. But you don't need to put models on the table to work that out. You can run that through dice apps. You can run it through things like Excel. I've got spreadsheets that kind of tell you how much damage a unit does to another unit, right? So you can just sit there and do that. I'd do that in the afternoon when I didn't have much to do at work. I'd just bang numbers into that spreadsheet and have a look at what the damage was like and kind of work out, does the unit live? Does the unit die? That sort of thing. So I might not have played that many games. I did a lot of thinking about those meta armies. I also played games with them. I played games with Bridgehead. I played games with Vanguard as prep for other people. So I sort of got that understanding of how those armies function. I played games with Star Shatter even. So people would sort of have that. I was giving other people reps into those armies. But like
that's a great way to learn, I find. Like if you play the army yourself as a way to learn it, you can play against it really well.
Yeah, 100%. If you're having issues playing against a certain matchup, just try playing a few games with it and you'll actually find, well, hey, I want to do this, but this is a problem. I can't do this for this reason. And then when you play against that army, you'll understand your opponent's limitations with things like that, right? So, yeah, I think to answer your main question, I didn't play a ton of games. I think that I spent a lot more time thinking about the important matchups. I spent a lot of time, playing other armies to, I guess, understand them a little bit better. And that probably helped a lot as well. That really, meant that I knew what everything did. The worst thing is when you play a hard game and, you're accounting for 3 or 4 of these things your opponent can do, and they say, hey, I can do this, and you're not ready for any of that. It can kind of blow your plans out of the water sometimes. And not getting surprised by stuff like that makes a big difference when you're sort of planning your turn out, planning your positioning out, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's bring it back to kind of the present here. So what is the actual list you took to Adelaide for context?
Yeah, cool. So I've got the a Winged Demon Prince with the Neverblade. So the Neverblade is the you're going to laugh here. I found out it's +2 strength. I was playing it as +1. It doesn't matter. It's +2 strength, +1 attack, +1 AP on the Hellforged weapons. I really wish I knew this because it actually mattered a couple of times, but I found out by reading this the other day. But anyway, there's that. There's Fady, who is the Warlord. Not that it matters a great deal. A lot of change with Infernal Puppeteer and the staff, so he shoots pretty good. 2 units Pinks, a unit of Plague Bearers, 2 Burning Chariots, 2 squads of 6 Flamers, and then there are 3 squads of Screamers. 2 of them are 3-mans, and 1 is a 6-man. So nice and compact, pretty small army when you look at it like that, but it's Tzeentch, all the best stuff out of the Tzeentch part of the Chaos Daemons book, I think.
Yeah, it looks very kind of like a little bit of everything. And I know there's not that many data sheets to choose from when you're picking a Tzeentch army or any demon army for that matter. So it's more about the ratios of units you land on and how you kit it out and how you play it. Why did you land on this specific version? I know you talked about some of your practice games leading to list alterations, but what is the synergy here, the idea behind this list?
Yeah, so I spent probably 5 minutes before every single game explaining how this army works to my opponent because everyone had a million questions because I've never seen it before. The stuff that it boils down to, right, is that Fate Weaver shoots indirect. The Lord of Change has Infernal Puppeteer, and if you don't know how that works, you pick a Tzeentch unit within 9 of him, and then you pick a model within that unit, and you shoot the Lord of Change's guns through that model. So there are a few different elements here that kind of work with that, but the main idea is that the 2 birds will shoot you for 5 turns. They'll do damage slowly over 5 turns. You'll use the Screamers to score. You will commit the Pinks at a certain point in the game where they can go and wrap things and tie things up and stand on objectives. And then you use the Plague Bearers to try and heroic into combats on objectives where they can then sticky things in your turn. That's kind of the main strategy. The prince there, like, stands in a building. We have access to the move through terrain features strat in this detachment, so you can just walk through a wall and go and bonk something. This prince is crazy, by the way. I'm sure you've done the math, Nick, but this guy absolutely pops off. He's outrageous.
Let's break it down. What is this prince?
Yeah, cool. So normal Chaos Demons Prince is a bit underwhelming. So it's either got 6 attacks at 823 or 14 sweeps, I think it is, at 601. So he's okay. The relic, as I mentioned before, gives him +2, as I just found out, strength, +1 attack, +1 AP. So he goes to 10-3-3 with 7 attacks on the big weapon, or 15 sweeps if you're playing guard, I guess. Then once per game, he gets to go +3 attacks. So he makes a charge, goes +3 attacks, so he goes up to 10. And every time he fights, he picks lethal, precision, or sustained. So what you get is you get a Demon Prince that essentially rolls in 10 attacks at strength 10, AP 3, 4 damage. There's then a strat in the book that works in combat or in shooting. So you can pop this in combat. If you pop it on its own, you get +2 strength. Fun fact, I was also playing that as +1. I found out it was +2 base the other day. Very cool. So he can go to strength 12, AP 3, 4 damage. And if you spend a flux token on that, you get +1 AP and +1 strength. So you go to 13, AP 4, 3 damage.
Yeah. So at that point, you're just murdering. Like whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really good for killing marine bodies. AP4 obviously is great. It's really good into Centurions. It's really good into everything. Like, look, you normally don't pop the full combo unless you're hitting something that you really need dead. It's often not great to go and spend 2 CP and a token. You often don't want to do that. But if you really need something dead, you absolutely pop that. You go all out. And then you can pop things like precision on top of that as well. Like there's a lot of a lot of Space Marine players will run the infiltrating apothecary in another unit, and that guy has no invuln. So you can just go, cool, pop precision, kill that, then don't allocate any more precision wounds to Marnius and just kill the rest of the unit, which is pretty nice. There's stuff like that you can do, but this guy, he slaps. He was very, very good in almost all the games.
So let me try to piece this together. We basically got Fate Weaver, who's like a big monster who shoots indirect fire, like pretty decent indirect fire. And then a Lord of Change who shoots through your other Tzeentch models. So you send out a screamer or something 14 inches through walls. It can see whatever it wants because it just ran forward. And then you can draw a line of sight in range from that screamer, nuke something quite quality with your Lord of Change while it's sitting behind a wall slave fleet. Yep. In the meantime, you got this Demon Prince. What is he deploying on the board, kind of acting as a deterrent to keep people away from the birds, or is he ingressing and doing a side quest?
Yeah, so I try to get him as far up the board as early as possible, right? I want that guy to be the thing that stops my opponent from pushing on the castle wherever the birds are hiding. So I'll normally have him try and get a lot of these GW tables have a big-ish center ruin, so I'll try and get him as far up into there as possible, as early as possible.
Nice. Okay, so he's a real midfield threat. And then I guess you're playing the game early with the 3-man screamers to do secondaries and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% the plan. The chariots as well. Some armies just can't really effectively kill the chariots early on. They're T8-9 wounds. They're kind of tough with a 4+ invuln. They're not tough into everything, but they're tough into some things.
If you are listening to this, it probably means you play Warhammer 40k. And if you're playing Warhammer, you need a lot of dice. Baron of Dice is where we get our dice from. They produce amazing different kinds of dice. We just recently got all kinds of different faction dice shipped to us, which we use on our stream games. But not only do they look really cool, but they're highly customizable. You can get different symbols, corners that are square, corners that are round, different shapes and sizes, different sided dice. It's all the rage. And they're customizable in color and design as well. They are so cool looking. Not only that, but they feel great to roll in your hands. I've never held dice that roll and feel this good. Not only that, but they are scientifically perfectly balanced. There are tons of case studies on people rolling thousands of dice and recording all the results that they get. And sometimes you might get a die that rolls just a few too many ones. We've all had to throw it out before. These dice are not like that. They are perfectly balanced to a T, thousands of rolls, perfect distribution. If you want to take your Warhammer game seriously and make sure the dice are not screwing you over, get some Baron of Dice.
How are you deploying this army? Is it a ball around your big monsters behind walls, or is it all over the place? And what's in reserve?
Yeah, so I basically always started 3 screamers and 6 flamers in normal reserve because you can go back into reserve. Anything can just be in reserve at any point in the game, pretty much. So I do that. I would make sure that the monsters never get shot on turn 1, even if that means deploying them all the way in the back corner. I would just make sure they never get shot on turn 1.
Right.
That's like the highest priority. Those guys have to shoot for the whole game to get value. The Lord of Change can essentially shoot wherever he wants to shoot anyway, whether like wherever he deploys. Obviously, Fate Weaver is a bit more limited by range, but again, because he shoots indirect, I don't think I ever had a game where they didn't have something to shoot on turn 1. I think maybe the Necron game I didn't because I just deployed them all the way in the corner so they wouldn't get shot by anything. I would always string pink horrors on my home objective, and I would string them as far around as possible to get as close to another objective. No, sorry, the plague bearers, sorry, not the pink horrors. I'd string them all the way as close as possible to another objective so I could roll an advance with the instrument, hopefully get onto a second objective on turn 1 if I could do it safely. If not, I would just push them and I'd use them, like I said before, as like a heroic threat when I put something else on that objective eventually. And then I would use a unit of pinks to screen the backfield. I would have a unit of 3 screamers and 1 chariot on like one flank ready to go do secondary. So I'd have things set up so they could always do containments. They could always do cleanse, engage if possible, depending on what the deployment was. So I'd have the little units for that. And yeah, I'd use 1 unit of pinks to like screen backfield, and one of them would be pushed up as far forward possible with the demon prints, essentially.
Interesting. Okay. So I get that that's a basic go-to game plan. One of the challenges I run into with the Tzeentch army is that its damage is like real low. You basically have the 2 indirect firebirds, and like screamers and flamers are like decent. So people, especially if they know what they're doing, which not everybody does into this archetype, it's pretty rare. But what if they know what they're doing? They can just like blitz you, right? They just, here's my army, I'm gonna run straight at your indirect fire, I'll take it on the chin, and then like by turn 2, turn 3 we'll be in combat. How do you handle that rush down?
Yeah, so I think I only had 1 game where that was really. Oh, no, I had 2 games that was kind of the game plan, right? I played a Tyranid army and I played an Orc army where they kind of just pushed into me pretty aggressively.
Right.
It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does. I would say it does do enough damage, right? So if your opponent goes first and they push on you, the first thing is that you get to pick up before they land on you. Like realistically, none of this stuff is first turn charging you. It's pushing, and it's going to charge you in its second turn, right? So you get a chance to pick up first. So what that means is you can use anything in your army to set up screens. You can redeploy wherever you like. But it also means that your opponent can't really screen all of their stuff if they're going to push their army at you. So against the Orc game, for example, I like picked up a chicken and some flamers, and I dropped on a flank, and I just basically blew up half of my opponent's, flank where not a lot of their stuff was. And they pushed into me with the rest of the stuff. And then the next turn, I'm like, cool, well, I'm going to heroic with these pinks. I'm going to touch a couple of models in each unit. Nothing can wipe the pinks. The pinks take a bunch of damage. I just pick them up out of combat and I shoot them again. It's really just about setting up screens. I do think that's the way that this army loses. I think that's probably the best way to beat it is just to rush it down and to hope that they can't sort of continue to maintain those screens. But because you can deploy so far back so safely, I found that it wasn't a massive problem. But again, I think if I was playing against it, that's how I would play against it. I would just be pushing it and trying to say, I don't care about your indirect, I'm just going to be in your face, I'm just going to kill you. But yeah, I just tried to pick up and screen, and I knew if they went first and they pushed me, I would have a chance to pick up and put down and kind of like pick stuff off from the sides. You might have to give them a big turn of primary, but if they're doing that, they're also sacrificing a lot of material in the army, right? If they're pushing into you and just trying to, say, I'm going to go first, I'm going to advance everything, I'm going to get in your face, I'm going to charge you, they are giving up material to do that. And I kind of think that I win the attrition war some of the time.
Yeah. Now I noticed a lot of flamers and burning chariots, and you kind of mentioned the guard matchup. Is that all anti-guard tech, or is that like a well-rounded Tzeentch army just kind of needs this stuff in your mind?
Well, the flamers are just really good with the what's it called, pyrogenesis strat, right? They go to strength 8 AP2 ignores cover. It's like even anti-anything, they're pretty good.
Yeah, right.
Strength 8 when they're near a lot of change, that is, sorry. So like they're anti-everything. Obviously, the big reason they're in big units is for guard. Like, you might have 3 mans for scoring if you weren't worried about guard. but they are primarily anti-guard tech. The chariots aren't necessarily anti-guard tech. They just happen to kind of be good into that matchup. But like the chariots are anti-everything tech. I think they're like really underrated for 115 points. They shoot, and what they do is they shoot something and they give Ignor's cover to the rest of your army shooting that target. So they're really good to shoot the Lord of Change through, or to shoot something and then shoot the Lord of Change and Fate Weaver at it, because you're often shooting those things where your opponent will get cover. And this just is essentially +1 AP. If your opponent's getting cover, the Burning Chariot is +1 AP for your 2 big monsters, right?
Right.
So that guy just helps you do more damage, especially into Marines. But yeah, like I said before, they on average tank a 10-man Scion unit. They win the fight because they overwatch and they shoot and they charge and they will kill 10 Scions before the 10 Scions will kill them unless the multi-gun pops off. But what can you do?
I love the way your brain works. You just like think about interactions in the game and kind of solve what those interactions as opposed to like this is a generically good unit.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think this unit would be as good if the meta wasn't the way that it is, right? But as I said, it's really good for guard and it's good for Vanguard because things like 3 Scions or like 3 Outriders or I don't know, like 5 Reavers can charge it. And if you overwatch and fight, there's a good chance you actually still out OC the 5 Reavers, even with the -1 OC. So like, it's pretty good into a lot of the meta units that I was expecting to see.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so it kind of works together, and it's like a lot tougher than it looks, right? Because it's got all 4 up invulns and it's multi-wound. What other defensive mechanics like help you stay alive? Because on the surface, it's just like 40 dudes, and they kind of just shove into midfield, and it's not that tough.
Yeah, so we haven't covered the flux token mechanic at all. This is by far the trolliest thing ever. It's great. Right. If you don't know how this works, right, start of the game, you get 3 flux tokens. Whenever you spend one, your opponent gets one. Whenever your opponent spends one, you get one. So you kind of pass them back and forth. At the start of your turn, if your opponent has one, you gain one. So you can add flux tokens to like the flux token economy, I guess. And you use them kind of like CP rerolls. So they use for hit, wound, save, damage, advance, hazardous check. There's something else, can't remember. I don't think I've used it for anything else. Your opponent can't use it for some of those things, but it's pretty similar. And you can also use them on strats, right? But there's no limitation to how many you can use. So you can, like, the big thing is like pink horrors, right? The big thing is your opponent has enough damage to kill 10 pink horrors. They don't have enough damage to kill 10 pink horrors if I have 5 rerolls, right? If I can say, cool, I've got 4 tokens now and a CP reroll, you can just roll 5 dice again. If your opponent's trying to one phase the pink horrors, that is a really strong defensive mechanic to keeping that unit alive. And the difference between taking 9 damage and taking 10 damage on pink horrors is massive. The final game I played, the one that was on stream, the Centurion unit shot pink horrors and it killed 9. And I don't think I've ever celebrated quite that hard for a pink horror living. So I brought 10 blue horrors back into the unit, and that was very cool.
Oh my god!
So that mechanic on its own keeps stuff alive. It's similar for like the Demon Prince, right? Like him tanking 4+ invulns is pretty crazy. A lot of time you'll push him, you'll go kill something, and then your opponent will put what they think is enough guns back in to kill him. But with 4 rerolls, it might not be enough stuff to kill him. And it's actually like what it is, right? I think that this just creates a massive amount of mental load on your opponent. Like 4 of my opponents clocked out over the weekend. Like just they spent so much time thinking about what I can do that like, it's like, well, they've got to consider, well, what if I don't reroll anything here?
That's kind of crazy. 4 people clocking out against you. I mean,
I didn't get clock anyone, by the way. I let them all finish. I'm a nice guy.
That's nice of you, yeah.
But
so this flux token thing, right? Like every time you use a flux token, they get one, they use it, you use it. What if somebody just hoards the flux tokens, right? Like you spend yours, then they hold on to them, and now you're generating 1 per command base. You're not going to have enough to make a meaningful difference, right?
Yeah, that's really true. So I found that it was one of 2 ways. Either people would just spend all of them as soon as they got them, or they would spend none. I actually don't really care. Like I didn't mind either way. I had one opponent who like let things die and he still had tokens and he's just like, I just don't want to give you any of them. I'm like, okay, I respect it. I think it's pretty easy to understand by sort of turn 2 or turn 3 what your opponent's going to do. It really sucks going first with this army because your opponent can just like hoard them till turn 5 and they can just have 5 rerolls or 6 rerolls or whatever it might be on turn 5. But every time they use one, realistically, you're getting a save reroll back. And the thing about this army, right, is everything has a 4+ invuln. So if they're using it on any dice roll that is less than a 4, the expected value of you getting value out of them using the token like is higher in your favor. Now, if they're winning you on 3s like a las cannon or something, and they're using it to reroll that, then like sure, it's slightly in their favor. But every other time, the expected value for you in terms of how durable your unit is, because like they're mostly used defensively, right? The mathematics behind it to say that if they're rolling a dice that's a 4 or worse, it's net neutral if they use the token, and if it's a 3 or better, it's slightly better for your opponent. So It's not like a great deal different. I didn't really care whether my opponents hoarded them or they spent them all as soon as they got them. I had to remind people to use them if they wanted to in like every game because people just aren't used to having your army mechanic be their army mechanic.
Right.
But yeah, like obviously it makes the monsters a little bit less durable, right? But I was trying really hard just to not use any until like a pivotal moment in the game, then dump them all and then kind of see what would happen, right? So like I would, I'd often use 1 on turn 1 if my opponent went first to pick stuff up, so I could pick 2 units up, generate 1 back immediately, so make a new flux token into the economy, but I'd still have 3. But I would try and save those 3 until the first time I either wanted +3 strength, +1 AP, or the first time I took a bulk amount of saves on pinks or a bulk amount of saves on like a Lord of Change or the Demon Prince or something like that.
Do you ever use them for like damage rolls on like D3 damage shots on your flint and your birds?
Yeah, sometimes, like only if I'm shooting really high quality targets and it actually mattered. Like I played one game that had like the Swarm Lord and Tyrant Guard in a unit and they were in combat with pinks, and I'm like, well, if I kill like 2 Tyrant Guard, there are no attacks left to actually kill the pink horrors anymore. So I'm like, cool, I'll reroll damages in there and fish for 3s. Like occasionally, I'd say like once or twice a game, depending on if my opponent was passing the tokens back to me or not. Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious on that one. So it sounds like there's a lot to manage with the tokens also being not only a resource that you and your opponent are sharing, but also tied to the effectiveness of your stratagems. How about did you manage your CP alongside with all this? What are you spending your CP on?
So I definitely found that the only time CP is a problem is when you need the damage, like when you need to push and do damage. Now, I wish I'd known that the 2 CP strat was +2 strength, because so many times I was using it at +1.
I literally can't believe you just didn't know that.
Mate, I'm going to be honest. I watched a YouTube video on the list, and the guy read the strats out, and I'm like, I'm actually a moron. So very cool.
The degree that you put no effort into winning this event and you won this event is amazing. It's
I don't want it to come off like smug or like anything like that. I just genuinely read it once. I committed it what I thought it did to memory, and I just didn't look at it again. So I feel like an idiot. But yeah, so like I'd pretty much always pick up on turn 1. Just having more stuff in reserve is good, and even if you don't bring it back down straight away, it does go into strat reserve, so you can keep it off for as long as you like. So like I'd always cycle the unit of flamers off unless they had something to do, and then I'd either come down with that unit of flamers that went off if it was my opponent's, if my opponents went first, so I could bring them back down on turn 1, or I'd bring the other unit in if it was turn 2, so the second unit could stay in the sky, past turn 3. I would then I pretty much never had to pick up the Lord of Change. I'd occasionally pick up Fate Weaver just to reposition him, but like the Lord of Change can kind of shoot from anywhere. And then anything else I picked up would normally be a chariot or like a 3-man Screamer unit. Just because they can go places and do things. I'd sometimes pick up a unit of pink horrors and I'd drop them on an objective on turn 1 and string back and kind of just be like, yeah, cool. Now this unit, that objective over there is mine. The pinks would have taken 2 turns to walk there, but now they're just there. Beyond that, it was really situational, right? Like I was mostly spending CP on damage on the plus strength stratagem. In the Noble Demon game, I spent 5 CP on the shoot and combat thing because everything was just in combat with Plague Bearers. That stratagem is really cool, by the way. If you don't know how that works, that one is you spend a CP, your unit that's in combat with an enemy unit doesn't count as being in combat with that unit anymore, so everything can shoot in and out. And if you kill a model out of theirs, you take a mortal wound and a 5 up, right? So the pinks don't really care. If you're in combat with 10 Plague Bearers and you kill the squad of 10, or on average taking 3 damage, it just doesn't really matter too much. But you can
Yeah.
also use that damage to then pull you out of combat so you can charge other things, which is pretty cool as well. So like I used that strat a lot in that game. It didn't really come up much in any of the others. And then like walk through walls for the prince on the go turn. But that was kind of it. The other strats are good, but they're really situational. Like if I had a unit of pinks that is like questionable, they're going to die when they get charged, you can use the strat where you roll a dice and your opponent misses on that number. And then I used it 3 times. I got rolled a 2 every single time into a unit that hit on 3s, which was very sad. You can reroll it with the tokens. So that's not too bad. It's like I had a unit of Formagants charge some pinks. There was like, whatever it was, like 45 attacks or something. I was like, cool, I'm going to make you miss on 4s. And that was enough for the unit to survive. Me bring back 8 or 10 blues or whatever it might have been. It's like stuff like that. But as like a general rule, it's like it's pick up, it's walk through walls, and it's pyrogenesis for the plus strength and AP.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It sounds like you can get by with all your command points and your strats. You got a good flow to it all. How are you at scoring points, like secondaries? I know your primary plan is kind of use horrors and plague bears, but just like your units have a lot of things to do. They got to shoot, they got to fight in their screamers, they want to channel for Lord Change, and then also secondaries. How do you score?
Yeah. So the primary game is really good. Like the army plays. I would say it plays primary really well, actually. The secondary game is a little bit harder, right? But I think it's got enough pieces that you're okay with just dropping and doing actions, especially being able to pick up, put down, right? Like the fact you can pick up a unit and then put it back down means you can drop a chariot in the corner of the board or 3 screamers in the corner of the board and just say, cool, you're going to contain, you're going to locus, you're going to get engaged and do whatever you want. And like, your opponent can't just ignore that unit because if they do, you'll pick it up the next turn and you'll do something else with it, right? So I'm pretty much always, score points over doing damage kind of guy. I think that's the way you win games.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think this army is a slow burn, right? This army is like, okay, I'm going to shoot you for 5 turns with 2 chickens. It's not a lot of damage, but it's some damage. I'm going to grind you down. I'm going to kill more of your stuff than you're going to kill of mine until you hard commit. If you hard commit, I'm going to shoot you with 12 flamers, 2 birds. I'm going to charge you with a prince. I'm going to charge you with 6 screamers. I'm going to charge you with some chariots. I'm going to do a lot of damage to you before you do it back to me. So like I was kind of okay with that game plan. I set up to do all the secondaries that you do on turn 1 when I deployed. I'm like measure for area denial, measure for containment, measure for engage. Just make sure that you can score as many of the cards that are in play as possible before you get to that point in time when you're drawing those cards. But also I just redraw. I just redraw the absolute crap out of my deck. Like if there's a card that I can't get and there's 8 cards I can get in the deck, I will just redraw. With CP regen is enough that you normally get 1 back for the first 3 turns. So like I'm just fine redrawing cards. I had a couple of games where I just got rubbish and I just cycled through 5 out of 6 bad cards on turn 1 through 3, and then I just got 25 primary between the end of turn 3 and the end of the game. So yeah, sometimes you just get crap cards, but if you're getting crap cards, redraw your cards. Like the probability you get something good is pretty good early on in the game.
Dude, you're giving me excitement to try my Tzeentch Daemons out again. I got a stream game coming up with I think I'm gonna with demons. I think I'm gonna bust out the Tzeentch for it. I'm really excited.
Right.
You got me inspired, Matt. I'm really excited to talk about part 2, get through your games, and really understand how exactly you made this miracle happen. But before I let you go, before we head over there, patrons, Matt, if you had one piece of advice you can give an aspiring Warhammer player, what would it be?
An aspiring Warhammer player. What do you mean by that? Because if you're aspiring, just go play the game. But do you mean?
Well, I mean some dude who's trying to like get really good. Win the big tournaments. Sure. Be the next guy who wins Adelaide with Tzeentch Daemons.
That'll probably not happen again. Like I'm lucky. So I think you just need to look at the games you're losing and really break down why you're losing them. Because I love losing games because you learn way more from games you lose than games you win. Right. And you just need to look at what the actual problem is and then look for ways to solve that problem in isolation. Don't look at the whole game as being an issue, but look at like the critical moments in the game and what went wrong, and then look at how you can solve those things. So it's like if you're getting outplayed on primary, or if you're not scoring enough secondaries, look at those problems in isolation and find solutions for those specific problems rather than just saying, oh, I got rinsed this game because my opponent just shot me off the board, right? Look at small problems and then kind of expand it out would be my advice.
I love that answer. That's a really good answer. It's always great talking to you, Matt. I'm so happy you won this
Thanks,
tournament.
man.
Listeners, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with even more Warhammer goodness. But if you want more of this conversation, which you totally should, you can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/AOW40K to get access to this episode's part 2, along with 277 other part 2s. Yes, we've been doing this podcast for that long. It's a long time, folks. We can't do it without your support. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you next time.
Like what you just listened to? Check out Art of War Down Under and Art of War Unbroken on the competitive 40K network. The Art of War 40K.com.